This is how I wrote my book.
Everything is figured out. Marketing isn't about to discover and write in their own voice.
I'm going to give you a behind-the-scenes kind of look into my thinking on how I wrote this book. You know, I know a lot of people, you know, and I thought this too before I started writing the book, like, it can't be so hard. Just take your course, take your content, just mash it together, repurpose it, and, you know, throw it in a book and sell it. And I know a lot of people think like that. It's not really true, okay? Writing this thing was hard. It was hard because I knew my content. I'd done it for years. I was kind of stuck in an echo chamber, and I didn't really understand, like, well, why can't I just do that? And then I'd read it, and it wouldn't read well. It was very dry, okay? So this is just kind of an unfiltered, me just sharing very recently after I've just finished writing this and sent it off to the publisher for editing and all that stuff, just giving you a behind-the-scenes look at what my thought process was, how several of my friends helped me kind of formulate my ideas. When I thought about writing this book, oh my goodness, I went through so many iterations and a lot of second guessing, and I'm just going to lay it all bare for you. You know, I signed this book deal many, many years ago, and I never wrote the book. Thankfully, my publishers, they honored the deal. But I went through some pretty tough, like, personal challenges over the last couple of years. I just did not have the creativity to write the book. And I'm glad I didn't, because in those interim years, I learned so much more. I had so much more time on the field of play, if you will, working with clients, working on bigger projects, that I was able to incorporate into the book. So I just want to say that outright so that you don't think that this is something I just baked up one day. I'm just giving you the honest journey of me as an author, okay? And when I finally sat down to write the book, I had just taken a big contract with a client of mine. I was very, very busy. I was on site, moved to Florida, the whole deal. And I had money. It was okay. So I decided, let me invest in a ghostwriter. And I know that might sound like, why would you hire a ghostwriter? You can write, can't you? You're a copywriter. I just didn't have the time. So I hired a ghostwriter. And they took all my transcripts from my podcasts, right? My other courses, right? My speaking engagements, right? And they took all this content. And of course, because I had a course, I had somewhat of a curriculum in my vault, if you will. I had a curriculum there. And so I told them, just write the book from all this stuff. Now, there's one quick thing I want to say here before I get into how all this worked, because I didn't actually end up using them. They did a lot of this work, and then I didn't use any of it. I started completely from scratch, right? So that was a lot of money that I spent that I didn't actually get anything for. Not their fault necessarily. I just wanted to write it. But when it comes to writing a book, in the book, in my book, and in my courses, in Brand New, I teach this. You have two types of entrepreneurs. There's a how-to-preneur, and then there's an ideapreneur. And I just made these words up. Okay? And when it comes to a book, a how-to-preneur obviously writes a how-to book, and an ideapreneur writes an idea-based book. And what I mean by this is that this book is curriculum-based, and this book is message-based. Now, I'm going to use myself as an example to help unpack this. I have a curriculum-based book. It's brand new. It's an 8-step blueprint called the Brand New Blueprint. Every chapter is on one of the steps, so on and so forth. People can move through it almost like it is a course. It's almost like as if it's a textbook. Now, I'm in the marketing industry. There are marketers out there who write message-based books like Seth Godin, Purple Cow, Tribes, This is Marketing. It's not necessarily a curriculum. He's sharing a philosophy, or he's sharing a different perspective on marketing as an industry. So whatever industry you're in, just realize that there are curriculum-based books and there are message-based books. And it's important that you know which one you want yours to be. Is there going to be a blend between the two? Yes, of course, but it's going to lean more towards one side than the other. So when I finally decided through a lot of back and forth to write this book, and it was going to be a curriculum-based book, I was struggling, honestly, to put some life into the book. It almost didn't feel like it had a heart. It sounded like a textbook. And part of the reason is because I'd waited so long to write the book. Like I told you, I'd gotten the deal, years earlier. And at that time, had I written the book at that time, I would have been that much closer to the time in my life that I was writing about. Now, I was writing about my life from like 8 years ago. It's hard for me to get back there emotionally and connect, right? So what I really, really did here, despite having a curriculum and having all of this how-to stuff mapped out, I really had to reconnect to my journey behind the book, behind how I built my business, because there's a lot of that in the book. And I really just had to, this is what really helped me. I had to answer this question. How or what do you want readers to feel? That was the key word. How do I want them to feel? A friend of mine asked me this. He said, Mike, it could use a little bit more heart in the book. The content's great, very tactical, very straightforward, very nuts and bolts. What do you want readers to feel? How do you want them to feel? And you know what I said? And this is in the opening of the book. I literally just say, a friend of mine asked me this. And I said, I want them to feel like this. Finally, somebody has put this stuff together. I want them to feel relief. I want them to feel like they've been handed the missing piece. Like somebody has put this all together. It's finally here. And when I asked myself that question, it colored every other chapter that I read. I was able to go back into the content and just think, okay, what do I want them to feel after this? I want them to feel like finally someone has explained copywriting in a way that made sense. Well, if that's true, what can I say? What can I add? What stories can I put in that will make them feel this way? Just to review a couple of things, right? Curriculum-based book or message-based book. What do you want them to feel? That's really important. Now, the third thing I'm going to share with you that was really, really important is creating contrast. Contrast, excuse my handwriting here, in terms of ideas. And contrast is what makes ideas interesting. You don't have to be contrarian necessarily, but contrast really helps. It creates friction, a little bit of friction. Friction is your friend when you're writing a book. Friction is your friend when you have a point of view, whether it's a curriculum how-to type point of view or a message how-to point of view. And this is actually, despite me having so much curriculum-based content, is how I started to work a little bit of my message into the book. So what I did to create contrast, this is a lot of this was because of my friend Jeff Goins, and he helped me kind of pull this apart. My friend Karen Anderson is the one who asked me, how do you want readers to feel? These were really, really important pieces that my friends gave me. And so what he asked me, what Jeff asked me is like, well, what do you see most people do when they're trying to build a personal brand? Like, what do they try to do, and why is it wrong? Why doesn't it work? And I was like, oh, I've never been asked that question before. Well, here's why it doesn't work. On one hand, some people just flat out lie about who they are and what they do. They rent a big Airbnb, stage a photo shoot, and act like it's their house. They just lie. That's ludicrous, right? And it's like, oh, that's interesting. That's okay. What else do they do that doesn't work? What's the opposite of what they do when they lie? And I thought to myself, they overshare. And he's like, what do you mean by that? I was like, they overshare in the name of authenticity. So on one hand, people lie. On the other hand, people are trying to be overly authentic and they air out all their dirty laundry. They talk about all sorts of things that are not relevant to the problem they're trying to help people solve, right? They overshare about, and again, you can get as personal as you want. I'm going to explain this in a second. This is the big analogy that colors the whole book, and it's the theme beyond the whole book. But I didn't get to it until I really thought about this. And I was like, well, here's what they talk about a divorce. They talk about trauma. They talk about abuse. They talk about infidelity. They talk about bulimia. They talk about, whatever it is. Not that those things are wrong, but if they have nothing to do with your brand, they have nothing to do with the problem you're trying to help people solve, then you're just airing out dirty laundry. And yeah, oversharing gets attention. But this kind of attention is like when you're on, the highway and there's a car wreck. Like, yeah, you get people who turn and look and they're like, oh my gosh, look at that accident. But that's what their brand is like. It's like a car wreck. And he's like, well, what should people do instead? I'm like, well, what's the opposite? Like, what makes a good brand? What makes a good personal brand? And then we came up with this kind of concept. And it's like, is it something that you can build a campfire around? And my goodness, that was what I wanted to say. That is the message, even though there are tactics and there's a curriculum behind everything. This right here is what I wanted people to understand. Okay, here's my lame attempt at drawing a fire, right? Like, the way a personal brand really works is if you have something and you become someone that is worthy of being a brand. You become someone that people want to build a campfire with, that people want to build a campfire around. They want to come to your gathering. It's warm. It's inviting. It's a cause or a mission or a problem that you're trying to solve that can make the world a better place. I'm just dropping stuff everywhere, okay? But this is the heart behind what I was trying to say. And this is what I wanted people to feel. So finally, somebody who's saying this, not just make $10 million a year, not just be on big stages and sell stuff out so you can be like kind of a jerk and, take pictures of your Lamborghini and act like you're all that. Finally, someone who's saying something that's truly authentic, who's advocating for integrity in the personal brand space. This is how I found the message. Okay, so I'm just giving you a behind the scenes of how I wrote this book. And as I went through every single chapter, okay, as I went through all the chapters, right, the process was real simple, right? As I took a lot of that there, everything we shared, I went into the chapters. And I opened every chapter with a story. And what I mean by that, a story, is not just a story for the sake of it. And I want you to take these notes down, okay? I know these things are really basic, but I just tried to answer these two questions in every chapter and find a story that illustrated it. How did you learn that? And what did you have to do to accomplish that? Those are the only two questions I tried to answer in every single chapter. And then I'd give the tactics and all the curriculum stuff, and it made sense. It created context for the content. How did you learn about this personal branding thing? Well, then I told the story. I was like, you know what? I think I really learned about this through previous careers. And actually, when I was a kid growing up, and I was an avid sports fan where I loved baseball, basketball, there are some players I liked more than others, even though it wasn't about their talent. There was something about their personality, the way they played, who they seemed to be, that I really, really liked. I didn't always necessarily like the best baseball player when I was growing up, Michael Jordan, the best basketball player. He wasn't necessarily my favorite player. And my point is, we've been around personal branding all the time, and that story just naturally flowed out. You see what's happening? How did you learn this stuff? And then, what did you have to do to accomplish it? And the answer wasn't just, I had great sales scripts and I just wrote copy. Or the answer was, I had to become a better person. I had to work on areas of my life. I had to change my inner game. I had to change my mindset. I had to grow in self-awareness. I had to be comfortable expressing my point of view. Right, that's all in the book. I had to be comfortable putting myself out there and sharing my personal stories and building a platform, even if nobody really engaged with me in the beginning. I had to learn how to persevere and build endurance and frankly build patience. Even if I was working hard and results didn't come right away. When I started to make sales pitches, I had to learn, I had to work on this inner game and say, no is not a no. No is one step closer to a yes. This had very little to do with marketing or branding and everything to do with my inner game, my mindset, my personal growth. And so what's happening here now is that I have a book that is on the cover about branding and marketing, but really it's like a personal growth and development book cloaked in marketing and branding. And I'll close with this, right? When you put a big project out there into the world, a book, a course, a coaching program, whatever it is, it's not just about, especially with a book, it's not about what you've done in the past up till this point. That's where I was getting stuck. Going back over to the whiteboard and seeing, you had a curriculum, you had things that you'd done, and you're writing about the past. I said, but a book is not just about what you've done. It's a cue. It's a signal to the world, to your audience, to your readers on what you're going to do. And so when I thought about it like that, I thought, yeah, I definitely want to put more and more personal growth, personal development content in the book. It's aligned with my growth as a startup, ramp up, build up, scale up, leader up, entrepreneur. But I want the book to signal the things I'm going to do in the future. Because I do want to write stuff about personal growth, personal development. I do want to write things about how entrepreneurship helped me become the best version of myself that I could become. That's what I married together in the book. Okay, so there's a lot of thoughts here, and they're just raw, off the cuff. In fact, I'm taping this literally 2 days after I sent in my final draft to my publisher and editor. So this is not something that all that stuff I just put on the board off the top of my head. But this is raw, this is real, and I'm documenting this because I want you to understand, I want you to get a glimpse and maybe extract some value from how I thought through this project. If you've ever thought about, writing a book, take some of these principles that I've shared with you today, incorporate them into your work. I hope that this little session that we shared was inspiring. What do I want people to feel? I hope you feel inspired. I hope you feel encouraged. I hope you don't feel alone. Oh my gosh, I felt like that for so much of the time that I was writing this book. Well, I'll tell you what, being on the other side of it now, I'm so glad it's done because it's a message I truly believe in. And that's what you want to feel about your own book. You want to become your own biggest fan when it comes to your work because you've poured in the sweat, the hours, the tears, the blood, right? This book didn't take me just a few months to write. It didn't take me a year to write. It didn't take me a few years. It took years of my life. It took my whole life. It was the aggregation of everything I've learned in my life, condensed into a book and also where I want to go. Okay. So I hope this was helpful to you. And thanks so much for letting me be a part of your journey and for picking up the book and being a small part of mine too. Thanks. I want to invite you to pick up a copy of my book, You Are the Brand. You can go on youarethebrandbook.com or find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, anywhere. I hope that you will consider picking up a copy of this book. It's going to serve as a guide for you, a roadmap, a blueprint for you, if you will. And don't give up on building your personal brand. You can do this. There is a process, and I'm here to help you. Hope to talk to you soon.